This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
So I guess we're in for another short one this Monday. Of course, I could easily expand out the show if I wanted to do another tangent on Rampage, but I think we're beating a dead horse on that one by now. And I know there will still be all the AEW defenders out there that'll keep trying to argue, oh, but basketball, oh, but playoffs, or whatever is going on right now in the land of sports. I really don't care. All I know is whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, or underwater basket weaving, it does not change the fact that Rampage has sucked since day one, and everyone pretty much knows it by now. I guess I'm just waiting until the point where Tony Khan finally just pulls the plug on it altogether, or they move out of that death time slot on Fridays and move the show to another day when people would actually bother wanting to watch it. But before we get into Rampage real quick, let me do some paperwork stuff. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast for anyone new to the show. We are on YouTube and Rumble each Monday and Friday for new content discussions on AEW, NWA, weekend pay-per-view events and specials, as well as our retro review series, which is a staple of the Friday podcast. We are currently amidst talking about World Championship Wrestling from 1986 and World Class Championship Wrestling from 1983. And as we progress through that library at the current moment, it is becoming more and more apparent that wrestling actually used to be pretty damn great back in the day. Now I don't even know what pro wrestling is in 2022, but it's certainly not what I grew up watching, that's for sure. But we do have two modern wrestling reports to run down today. In addition to Rampage, we also have NWA Powerrr, which, trust me, had its share of issues, just like Rampage did this weekend. And we will surely get to that. At least when I watch NWA Powerrr, I get the sense that Billy Corgan is actually trying to put together a somewhat competent wrestling program. He just needs to can it with all the goofiness and poor attempts at comedy on his show, and it'd be the best wrestling show today, bar none. And that includes topping Raw and SmackDown for all of you out there that think I'm solely an AEW hater. I mean, AEW sucks most of the time, but at least they have a handful of things that keep me invested in their weekly television program, whereas Raw and SmackDown have been dead to me for years now. Anyway, we'll move along with the show here. While we're in a sour mood from the jump, let's keep that train rolling by talking about this 5:30 p.m. episode of Rampage, which I'm sure will tank in the ratings just like it did last week. I think the question is, do they maintain that same poor viewership, or does it actually drop below the 280,000 viewers or whatever they did last week? And we open with, directly as I wrote down here, a whole bunch of guys doing stuff. And if you like guys doing stuff with very little logic, rhyme, or reason to it, well, you tuned into the right match. By the way, for the record, if you care, it's Butcher, Blade, and Mark Quinn versus Death Triangle. And yes, the team known as Death Triangle were in fact the baby faces in this match. You all know my thoughts on Rey Fenix and Pentagon by now, and if you don't, just go watch any match I've reviewed of theirs. Butcher and Blade are completely irrelevant by now, and Mark Quinn, I didn't even recognize him in this match with a beard. He looked like a completely different person. Always nice to see Pac wrestle. I wish we got to see him work more than 5 times in a given year, because when we do see him, he's always great. I'd prefer if he wasn't doing tag matches with the Lucha Fucks, but what can you do? Oh yeah, and Kyle O'Reilly was there, looking stoic. He's apparently wrestling Phoenix in the Owen Hart tournament on Dynamite, so I guess he was out there scouting. Either that or he's probably thinking to himself, oh great, I'm going to have to find a way to pry a good match out of this fucking asshat. It also begged the question when this whole thing was over, if Phoenix is the one competing on Dynamite, why didn't he get the pin in the match? Whatever. And afterwards, the House of Black appeared and disappeared on the ring apron. They got a popcorn fart reaction from the crowd, and well, if anything was established in that 15 seconds, I think we're long past the point of return with this House of Black nonsense. Brody King and Buddy Matthews need to just go away entirely, and Malachi Black needs to be written off of TV for about a whole year and be brought back with a totally different gimmick and character. Because any potential this group had of being saved following that Julia Hart Varsity Blonde segment from 2 weeks ago has been completely neutered. Moving along with the show, Shawn Spears had a squash against one of the Bear Country dudes, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Then we had Tony Nese doing a promo with Mark Sterling in the back, and Sterling is, of course, selling the injury after getting powerbombed through the table from Wardlow. So then Tony tells Sterling that he can take Danhausen and Hook on his own, and he's so confident in doing so that he tells Sterling to put down a $10,000 down payment on a bet that Tony Nese will win. I wouldn't bet on those odds. And by the way, do I need to even mention the obvious flaw here? That being that the heel is valiantly willing to fight the babyfaces at the disadvantage. Very courageous of the bad guy. Riho and Ruby Riott had a tournament match, and once again, I'm sorry. Whether Riho is wrestling undersized Japanese schoolgirls or she's wrestling grown women, it makes no difference to me. I can't take Riho seriously. Her ring gear is ridiculous. She's putridly small, and her offense is beyond atrocious. And I hate to be that guy, but, you know, we're talking about particular workers being past the point of return on this show. Ruby Riott's kind of another one of those talents. Whatever steam or momentum she had when she first showed up and challenged Britt Baker for the belt, it's gone. I just don't care about her anymore. I'm over Ruby. If she wins the tournament and they start building her up as a potential opponent for Jade Cargill, where Ruby actually wins the TBS belt, maybe there's potential to save her, but until they actually do something constructive with her, she's just another person that exists on the program with no direction. And by the way, this is coming from someone who was never that high on Ruby in WWE to begin with. I never got the gimmick or what people saw in her that made her so great, but I will not deny that when she first showed up in AEW, she was white hot. Now she's lukewarm at best. Probably my favorite part of the show was the backstage pre-tape they did with the Gun Club and the Acclaimed, where Father Billy was trying to come up with signature gimmicks and catchphrases for both teams, since apparently they're going to be a super group going forward. And the whole payoff to the segment was Billy saying that as their manager, he took it upon himself to get them booked in a match on Dark Elevation. And there's a pause. They all look at each other for a minute. And they all go, yeah! So yes, the gimmick is in fact that they're complete geeks. And I think if they tried this with any other group aside from the Guns, it would probably fall flat on its face. But Billy Austin and Colton are already kind of over as the Weasley immature dicks where they could probably make this work if they wanted to. And Billy Gunn continues to be my favorite wrestler of all time. He's totally there to just pick up a paycheck, but he's still awesome. And he's certainly got a better body than about 80% of the people working there, and he's barely even part-time in the ring. Then we had a Jade Cargill Baddies segment where they were all making fun of the fact that Sheeta is not able to compete in the tournament because she was not cleared by the medical team. So as a replacement, Red Velvet will now be facing Chris Statlander, who came out to the stage, literally shrugged her shoulders, and totally looked like she didn't want to be there. Can't blame her. And the main event was Frankie Kazarian versus Scorpio Sky for the TNT Championship. I also learned during the entrances that Kaz's win-loss record in singles competition is apparently 71-29. If you asked me on the spot to name a singles match I've seen Kazarian have on AEW TV in the last 3 years, I'd be totally out to lunch. But apparently he's had a lot of them. Who'd have thunk it? Would have been great to actually maybe see a handful of them. And I decided that if I just watch this match in a vacuum and completely discount the fact that I never see Kaz wrestle, and the fact that I have no idea what in the fuck is going on with anything involving Dan Lambert, Ethan Page, or Scorpio Sky on this show right now, I like the match. Thought it was a very good little main event. And the crowd was irritating as all get out with whatever they were doing with those stupid wind-up lawnmower chants. Maybe it's an SCU thing that totally went over my head, but whatever it was annoying. But Kaz, I mean, I'd probably say the same thing about him as I said with Pac. You know, the few times I actually get to see him wrestle in a given year, he always knocks it out of the park. I mean, the guy's been around for years, but he still wrestles just as well now as he did 20 or so years ago when he was just starting up in the business. I always kind of considered him a late bloomer when it came to like getting the fuller package of becoming an overall well-rounded talent. For so many years, I would watch Kazarian work in places like TNA, and I don't know, he was always a great worker, but he was always missing something. And I don't really think it was until I saw him start teaming with Daniels where I really got to see more of that personality, and he really came out of his shell more. The guys obviously have good chemistry together here, so, I mean, the wrestling was very good from what I saw. You know, chain wrestling, working body parts, you know, building up drama to the point where I can actually buy that these guys were trying to have a serious fight. Kaz did a sick-looking slingshot cutter deal at one point where he launched Scorpio into the ring off the apron, and he practically spiked him on top of his head. He got so much leverage on it. You know, either that or Scorpio overcompensated on the rope assist. The finish I thought was a little overbooked, and not necessarily discrediting the Dan Lambert, Ethan Page run-in at the end with Page clocking Kaz in the back of the head with the belt when he had the chicken wing locked in on Scorpio. What I didn't like about it was that they did the spot, and then when Page flipped Scorpio onto Kaz for the cover, Kaz kicked out. Also, they could just have Scorpio hit him with his finisher anyway and pin him like 30 seconds later. Just totally unnecessary. And I'll admit, I did laugh at the afterbirth where after Scorpio teases dissension with Page and Lambert, he turns around and clocks Kaz in the head with the belt, and then they send Sammy Guevara in to run the heels off. Meanwhile, Guevara and Conti are getting showered with booze. So they are indeed going to try and force feed Guevara down people's throats as a babyface now instead of just going with the crowd response. The people want to boo Guevara and Conti because they're completely unlikable douchebag high school pricks, but nope, gotta try and make the people cheer them. So, it's going to be interesting to see how Cody Rhodes 2.0 winds up. You know, because it worked so well for Cody and Brandy the first time around. Let's go back to the well with it again, I guess. Well, the show was certainly better than last week. Of course, that's grading on a curve in many ways. I mean, when you compare it to last week, it's like asking what tasted better, the diarrheal explosion or a couple deer turds. Considering they were in Long Island, I was kind of shocked that they didn't just have MJF go out for a quick squash, just to give it something, but, that would also imply that they're even trying to make the show semi-watchable at this point. And that'll take us to NWA Powerrr. This would have been Season 8, Episode 7. And our program begins this week with a Doug Williams-Harry Smith promo to hype up the big six-man showdown in the main event. And obviously Williams and Aldis have some history going back to their TNA days, so that was mentioned here. I also enjoyed the moment here in this interview where Smith was talking about the legacy of the Hart family, and he tries to demonstrate that by doing the heart pound into his chest. But in order to do that, he also had to shove Kyle's microphone out of the way because he was blocking his chest. And then he quoted Winston Churchill and kind of lost me. Don't get me wrong, I like Harry Smith and Doug Williams, but promo work, not exactly their forte. Our first match of the show is Camille in a non-title match against, I believe they said her name was Paula Blaze. Although, according to Kyle Davis's ring intros, the only thing I heard was Paula. But Paula Blaze works too. And with what little to nothing I have actually seen of Paula on this show, I can confidently say that she did not do anything here to impress me. Her rope running is first day training at wrestling school bad. This whole match was really weird. They're having what I would merely just describe as a match early on. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just kind of there. And then for seemingly no reason at all, they do an injury angle in this match where Camille blows out her right quad after a leapfrog attempt. And they spend like a good amount on this to where I legitimately thought that she had hurt herself and that they were going to have to stop the match. But then all of a sudden, Tom Latimer gets in the ring and he gets kicked in the balls by Paula. So hard, in fact, that he legitimately loses a shoe in the process. And this then leads to the match continuing, where Paula proceeds to get a decent amount of heat on Camille. And I've said this before when it comes to Camille, the last thing that she needs to be doing in her matches is long-term selling. She's not just referred to as the brick house on this show. I mean, she's legitimately built like a brick house. She's strong, she's tall, she's the exact kind of unstoppable force, immovable object monster that does not need to sell because she can get over entirely based on just going in there and squashing chicks in like 90 seconds. So why they felt it was necessary to book an injury angle in this match, I have no idea. It also didn't help that Paula's offense looks like shit, and it's totally unbelievable watching Camille have to try and pretend like she's getting her ass beat by this chick. So they're doing stuff for a little bit. Camille starts making a small little comeback wherein she proceeds to start perfectly executing a lot of her signature offense, thus completely negating the injury angle they spent like 5 minutes building up because Camille was pretty much no-selling everything she did prior. And I'm not kidding. The finish to this match is exactly as I wrote down here in my notes. Latimer comes back down with an ice bag under his crotch, and while the ref is distracted with him, Camille kicks Paula in the vagina and then pins her after a spear. Because Lord forbid, Camille needed a distraction to beat Paula Blaze. So that whole segment was a pretty big dud. Then we had a Matt Taven promo, where he basically made it known that he's going after the NWA World's title. He also said the actual word title about 11 times in one sentence, so I guess he's got a little bit of that WWE propaganda injected in him, where you're basically bound by law to never say the word belt or strap, but you must either refer to it as a title or a championship. Surprised he didn't actually use the phrase championship opportunity here. And speaking of phrases, I must admit, Taven's catchphrase, no bueno. So that led to Taven versus Judas. This is also no bueno. It was very bored watching this match. I think I can chalk up every bit of Judas's offense to the following things. He can do a couple power moves and a lot of choking. So he's basically Omos, just shave off about 8 inches and he's the wrong skin pigment. Yawned about 8 or 9 times during the course of this match. And the finish saw Sal Renaro's ridiculous haircut and Gags the Gimp come out for the blatant DQ. And trust me, I tried to think of a snide remark to describe Gags the Gimp, but no, I think that one just about writes itself. No need to add anything on to that. Which promptly led to Joe Galley making the groundbreaking announcement that there was going to be a formatting shift and that we were going to be seeing the little faction of these outlaw fuckwits in action right after the break. So that took us to this Dirty Dildo's miserably abysmal tag match, and figuring that it was going to be exactly that, miserably abysmal, I went ahead and skipped over this hot garbage. As soon as I read the graphic on the screen for this match, my bladder kicked into full effect. One might call that opportune timing. I call that a gift from God. Oh, and by the way, new circulating headline. Angelina Love now has a thing for Fandango too. So now I guess Velvet and Angelina are going to be having some issues to work out going forward. I guess that promptly leads to a stipulation match where the winner of Angelina versus Velvet gets to fuck Fandango. And with that all said, discounting the sheer horrors that were more than likely presented just a few minutes prior, NWA has kind of the reverse AEW model of booking, where with the NWA, they'll usually manage to find a way to follow something stupid or trashy with something good. With AEW, it's the polar opposite effect. But we had Pope doing an interview with Kyle, and while he did not say a whole lot, it was still 1,000 times better than anything I had seen on the show up to this point. Basically calls out Trevor Murdoch next week because they have some things that they need to hash out together. Then we had a 3-way to determine the number 1 contender to the NWA Women's World title. It's Genocide, Kylan King, and Chelsea Green. And there's a reason that I constantly talk about why I do not like multi-person matches in wrestling, especially modern ones. Usually because they're sloppy, overly choreographed, and not very well put together. I think this one hit on just about all those bullet points. And no, that's not only because they're girls, although it's a key part of it. Mostly the problem is that they're all green as goose shit and probably shouldn't be doing 3-ways or 4-ways or 5-ways until they can learn how to do a decent collar and elbow tie-up. There is honestly not a whole lot I wrote down about it. I particularly enjoyed the part in this match where Chelsea went for a crossbody dive onto both girls on the outside, and after catching her in the air, they proceed to not slam her into the ring post or, something impactful. No, instead, they just gently placed Chelsea on the ring apron. Like they were tucking her into bed for the evening. Just gently putting her down. There you go. For most of it, it was spots. Timing was not great for most of it. Kylan hit an RKO at one point, and I just kind of rolled my eyes at it. That move has almost become like the new suicide dive of overdone moves in the wrestling business. Everyone does it. Most of them look like shit. And it, of course, never leads to the finish. Like, I don't know. People just need to cut it out with the cutters and RKO moves. Let Orton take care of that move on the other network where it actually gets a reaction and the people pop for it. The finish was at least pretty well done. I will admit, Kylan's finisher looks very impressive, so I'll give her that. It did kind of seem surprising that they didn't put Chelsea over, but I don't know, maybe they don't want to do heel versus heel with her and Camille. Kylan's at least got some size and bulk to her, so there's a shred of credibility in that program, but yeah, this is another one I was not too fond of on this show. And it was a grind to get here, but at least they closed with something moderately good. Main event is all three Cardona family teammates squaring off against Nick Aldis, Harry Smith, and Doug Williams. If Excalibur were calling this, he'd probably refer to it as a trios match, but because we're in America and we're not marks for what they do in Mexico, this one was accurately referred to as a six-man tag, just like the good old days. And actually, here are my exact first words to this match. Wrestling. Honest to God, old school professional wrestling with moves and holds and limb working and selling. Not doing stupid WWE comedy angles or badly acted out AEW skits that make the show look outlaw and Bush League. Honestly, I kind of wish this would have just been the entire 60-minute program. Would have been a lot better. Some really nice stuff in the match, though. Harry Smith was outstanding during this match. That delayed vertical on Mike Knox, where he just held him up in the air for like almost 20 whole seconds, that looked impressive. I like the double team spots with Smith and Williams. Their stuff looked really fluid together. You know, Aldis got a nice little hot tag to run wild at the end there. I like the finish where, you know, things kind of broke down with all six guys. Cardona went for the radio silence, but Aldis countered that into a powerbomb. Tried for the clove relief, but VSK ended up breaking that up with the chop block. Went to the top rope after the tag, but Williams shoved him off the top rope, and then Aldis immediately put him in the clove relief for the submission win. I mean, it was all action, but it was straight out of the playbook of one of those old fast-paced NWA Horseman-style tag matches that just moved from beginning to end and everything looked great. There was no dead air time, just bam, 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 bam with transitions. And in the case of this match, you know, everything made sense, and it wasn't the Beta Bucks kind of all-action match. You know, their version is all action, no logic. You know, this at least had logic. And whereas with the WWE finish from Sunday in the six-man, where they had the heel champion pin one of the baby faces to set up, well, basically nothing, at least they put the babyface challenger over here to set up him as the next title challenger for the champion. So this is all well done. I really like this main event. Looking back in hindsight, I probably should have just gone ahead and watched the main event only, because I probably would not have missed much beyond that. I would say this is a very skippable episode of NWA Powerrr, if we're going by things that mattered. Main event was very good, but beyond that, this show was nothing to write home about. And had I actually sat down and tortured myself with whatever happened in that Dirty Dildos miserably dreadful tag match, I'd probably have differing thoughts about that one after the fact. So, consider that skip well thought out. That was a good one for my sanity. But that'll take us to the end of this one. Thanks for stopping into the 5 Starr Wrestling Report podcast. We'll be back this coming Friday for more Dynamite talk and retro content. Hopefully Dynamite doesn't involve seeing someone fall 30 feet onto folding chairs in the middle of a wrestling match, which ultimately leads to him losing in the end via roll-up. Hey, I didn't vote him Booker of the Year. Don't blame me. I just watch the bullshit and report on what I see. Take care, all. Peace.